Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this talk on the National Underground Asset Register, or NUAR. We've got an update for you. We'll give an overview of NUAR, our approach, progress to date, and timelines for the future. And NUAR is part of the government's efforts to build back better and greener with tangible benefits and to speed up the delivery of housing and infrastructure projects from design to build. So we'll be getting an update on the fast access to underground asset data work that's been going on that's going to save utilities companies, local authorities, time and money. So to give us this talk, we have three speakers who are Guy Ledger. He's Digital Director for Atkins UK Infrastructure Division, which provides engineering, design and consultancy services to the public and private sector across the UK. He's a civil engineer. Over the past 4 years, he's led a particular focus on how organisations can create value through better data sharing. We have Bob Chell, who joined One Spatial in 1998. His primary areas of interest are in harnessing cognitive diversity, rules-based patterns, data modeling, geospatial data management, quantitative data quality management techniques, and spatial data infrastructures. And also we have Helen Markides, who's developed a career across policy, project management, monitoring, and evaluation in the both public and private sector. And Helen leads two digital projects, London's Underground Asset Register and the Infrastructure Mapping Application. Guy, I think you're going to start us off.
I will. Robin, thank you very much for that introduction, and welcome to everyone on the call. Thank you very much for joining our presentation today. As I say, I'm Guy Ledger. I'm Project Director for the National Underground Asset Register project, and it's my responsibility to make sure that we deliver a successful outcome for Geospatial Commission. So I'm joined by my two colleagues, Helen and Bob, and between us, we would like to talk to you about three things. One is, firstly, I'm going to give you an overview of the NUAR project. I'm then going to hand over to Helen, and Helen's going to go on to tell you about how we are engaging with all of the owners of underground assets, i.e. all of the owners of the pipes and wires beneath our feet. And then Bob will then speak to you about how we're seeking to access that underground asset data and then map that data into NUAR, into the National Underground Asset Register that we're building. So let me start by giving you an overview of the National Underground Asset Register. I'm going to talk about kind of what NUAR is, why it's needed, the benefits that it will drive and that it will create, and then a quick summary of where we are today and where we're going. So what is NUAR? Well, or rather, I should say, what will NUAR be? So essentially, NUAR is a secure cloud-based platform, or more accurately, I should maybe say that it's going to be a service, and it will do three things. Firstly, asset owners, such as local authorities or utilities, or any organisation that owns the pipes and wires beneath our feet, they will be able to make their data much more readily available to organisations who are seeking to dig or excavate the ground. Secondly, organisations who then want to know the location of buried pipes and wires, they can get that information much more easily in one place to their phone, to their tablet, or to their laptop or their computer. And then lastly, when someone is digging a hole and they discover that something is different, it can be recorded and it can be shared back to those utility and underground asset owners. But then why do we need it? And what is the problem that NUAR is seeking to solve? Well, the answer here is quite simple. Currently, there's something like 4 million excavations that are carried out every year. And anyone who's planning one of these excavations is obliged to acquire information about the location of all the buried services before they start their work, before they dig a hole. And that information is dispersed and it's fragmented. It's held separately by each individual asset owner organisation. The data varies in format and quality, And the process for acquiring that information and data, it can be slow, it can be time consuming, and sometimes that causes people to kind of cut corners and take risks. And when you put all of these factors together, they elevate the likelihood of a utility strike. And there are something like 60,000 utility strikes each year. That's more than 160 per day. And every incident has the potential to cause either kind of serious injury or even death. Utility strikes have caused disruption for everyone, for road users, for pedestrians, for local residents, local businesses, for schools, for emergency services. The list is really long. Repairing those broken assets causes noise, it causes pollution. And with any construction activity, there is also then that carries a carbon impact as well. So ultimately, utility strikes lead to unnecessary carbon. And then lastly, at the end of the day, the cost of repairing those assets flows through to higher customer bills for their water, their gas, or their electric, or their telecoms, but also can flow through to higher council tax charges. So by solving this problem, there are lots of people that are going to benefit. There are the asset owners themselves who will be able to share the location of their assets more easily, speedily, and efficiently. So that will save them time and money. It will be easier and faster for planners and excavators to get access to the location of buried assets, making their jobs easier, particularly when planning emergency works. They'll be able to plan and dig a hole with more confidence. There'll be benefits for people who are responsible for managing data and protecting assets. And of course, there's going to be the benefit to the general public and from businesses from the reduced disruption. Now, work done by Geospatial Commission estimates that the total annual cost of striking underground assets costs the UK economy something, an eye-watering amount of money, something like 2.4 billion pounds per year. And these are avoidable costs, and as such, they really can't be ignored. With NUAR in place, the study shows that we can make some savings against those utility strikes, and that will amount to an annual saving of £350 million per year. So against this figure, the cost of implementing the NUAR platform, the NUAR service, it has a return of something like a 30-fold benefit. And this is one of the highest cost-benefit ratios of any public sector investment currently in play. So from a government point of view, this project is highly desirable and it's a high beneficial major project. And at the risk of repeating myself, these benefits will then manifest themselves at local level too. So they'll through reduced disruption, reduced pollution, more efficient planning, lower avoidable costs caused by kind of accommodating unforeseen issues from poor data. And lastly, NUAR has the potential to unlock other use cases and benefits down the line, such as better streetworks coordination. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this slide, other than to say NUAR is being delivered by an array of organisations and parts of government in a really truly collaborative way, and I think we're illustrating that today by the three of us on this call. But probably most notably from this slide is that the team includes CP&I and the NCSC, both the security agencies, and both are integral to this project, making sure that the way that we execute the project is safe and secure, but most importantly that the NUAR platform and the service that we're creating will be a secure and safe system. Now, we started the project last September. Our timeline is to have a fully operational national platform available and ready by September 2024. And whilst that might seem like a long way off, you need to bear in mind that the challenge involved is quite significant. So we have more than 650 asset owners that we need to engage with, and we need to acquire their data. We also need to build a system that will ingest all of that data in a repeatable and sustainable way into a standard model and then display that data in an aggregated format effectively through a single window. So meeting this challenge, there are three key enablers. There are three kind of key instruments. Firstly, there's something called the Data Expiration Agreement. And this is an agreement between the asset owner and Atkins as the delivery partner here. And that enables us to access your data and then do the necessary work to work out how we transform and ingest that data ultimately into the system. The second instrument here is something called the Data Ingestion Specification. And the Data Ingestion Specification makes sure that we then have the right ongoing alignment of the asset owner's source data, and that we understand the model for mapping that into the NUAR platform going forwards. And then the third key enabler is the Data Distribution Agreement. And then this is an agreement between the asset owner and Cabinet Office, so government, and that then allows the publishing of that data to the NUAR platform in the future on an ongoing basis. So we're 6 months into the project and we are on track and we're where we want to be. By the end of March, we will have a working version of the platform ready for user research. And focusing on 3 initial regions, to date we have engaged with something like 250 asset owners already out of the 650. We have almost 80 that are already signed up to the data expiration agreements. 35 asset owners have provided their data to us and we're in progress of transforming that data. And 2 asset owners have signed up to the long-term data distribution agreement. So right now we're in really good shape. We have the necessary momentum, but the success of the project hinges on engaging and onboarding each and every organisation that owns or is responsible for the assets underneath our feet. So with that, I'm going to hand over now to Helen Markides from GLA, who's going to tell you something about how we're engaging with asset owners, particularly local authorities, and how we're seeking to onboard their data to the project. Helen.
Thanks, Guy. So like Guy said, I'm Helen. I work at the Greater London Authority, or GLA. GLA has been involved in NUAR right from the very beginning, back in 2019, when it was just a pilot project, and we're delighted to be working alongside Atkins, One Spatial and the Geospatial Commission to now be building out an operational platform. So I'm going to talk today about our approach to onboarding, and I thought it would be useful to start off by saying, what do we actually mean by onboarding? And broadly, it's the process of introducing a new asset owner to NUAR, whether they're a local authority or a telco or a utility or a transport provider, helping them understand what it is, the benefits, and how we'd like to engage with them going forward. So it's broadly the early part of the asset owner journey with NUAR. In terms of our approach, we had 3 strategic components for deciding who to engage with first. The first one, which is perhaps obvious, but it's to capitalise on existing momentum. Start off with people who are already interested and keen for this. London was picked as one of the first 2 pilot regions, as there was already an existing pilot project with some key players like TfL and Thames Water, who were already interested and jumped at the project. And in terms of signing up local authorities, we initially reached out to boroughs who either we worked very closely with on infrastructure space, or who we knew were digitally innovative and would jump at the chance to work on a kind of pioneering data project like this. The second key component is obtain senior sponsorship early, and we found that this was absolutely critical to unlock doors at the operational level. We did this in 2 ways. One, the Mayor of London convenes the London Infrastructure Group. This is a group with CEO level representatives of all of the infrastructure providers across London. And we presented there on NUAR and we got their senior buy-in from the outset. And that really introduced us to the right contacts. It meant when we had the initial meetings, we could say your CEO already supports that, and that really sped up the process. With local authorities, we engaged with London councils, and we also used the Deputy Mayor to reach out to leaders of local authorities across London and get that senior buy-in early. The final component was GC and GLA were already singing from the rooftops about NUAR, but also we used as many networks as we could to disseminate the message. So in the local authority space, we engaged with LOTI, the London Office of Technology and Innovation, the London Infrastructure Group, London Councils, and we did a similar thing in the utility space too, so that more and more networks were sharing it to their engaged communities. Then once we get to the individual asset owner onboarding journey, it typically starts with an introductory call. Sometimes this takes a few times to find the right home within an asset owner. But once you've got the right contact, it kind of kickstarts the main parts of the onboarding journey, which are the legal review and the data collection review. So the legal review is really important to review the data sharing agreements, which Guy already mentioned. And the data collection process, we like to start that as early as possible in the process. We don't want to wait until the legal agreement is signed to start talking about data collection. We try and run it concurrently. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is simply legal review takes a long time. So we don't want to wait until it's signed to only then start talking about data collection. But secondly, having a greater understanding of the types of data that's being provided, what's going to be done to it in terms of the transformation process and who's going to be using it can really expedite and facilitate the legal review, because then it means our NUAR contacts, when they give it to their legal team, they give them the bigger context and the bigger picture of how it's going to be used. So that ends with the legal agreement being signed and the data being shared. In terms of the GLA's onboarding journey in London, so in 2019, we engaged with 6 local authorities for the pilot. We then moved into the preparation phase and we doubled our coverage to 12 local authorities. And then since the build phase started in September, we've really expanded our efforts and reached out to all 33 local authorities in London. And what's really incredible is that in just a few months, 22 of them have already signed legal agreements with us, many of whom have shared data, and the other 11 are all at different stages of legal review and engagement. So hopefully that map will turn green soon. The key things to note, two things I want to highlight here are that the boroughs who've been with us since the beginning have stayed throughout. We haven't had any dropout. They're really bought into this. And the second is that some of the boroughs that we've only reached out to for the first time in the last few months have already shared data with us. So they're really, they know that NUAR is coming and they want to get ready and involved for that. So Guy has already mentioned a lot of the benefits of NUAR for asset owners and for local authorities. And we've got listed here some of the key use cases. I'll just talk in a bit more detail about the benefit for local authorities and residents. NUAR will allow the sector to plan infrastructure more effectively. It will reduce the risk to life. It will reduce the risk of serious injuries, and it will reduce widespread disruption caused when underground pipes and cables are struck by mistake. It will also create numerous indirect benefits, such as improving air quality, promoting healthier streets by reducing congestion on the roads, and it will help to prevent costly delays associated with poor infrastructure planning. So I think what we've got here are the 4 use cases, but one thing that hasn't been said before is that when NUAR is built, local authorities will just get unprecedented access to underground asset data from across the whole sector, alongside details of their own assets, and that's going to be super valuable. Just to kind of bring that to life for you, in last year, we reached out to over 150 different stakeholders and tested the NUAR platform, both online and sometimes out on site. So we've got a picture here of the Deputy Mayor on site accessing NUAR on his tablet alongside an actual excavation. And you can see from some of the quotes here that there is just huge enthusiasm and support, and people really, they were biting our hands off to get access to this tomorrow if they could. That being said, it's not been without some challenges. Even with willing stakeholders, organisations are at different stages of technological and organisational maturity around data sharing, and it requires dedicated time to bring everyone on board to ensure consistency and data accuracy. And it's also just such a huge and diverse sector. Some of the key challenges are First one is a technical one, different data taxonomies and formats. And you can imagine that across the water, the gas, the power, the local authority, the telco sector, there's a vast range in kind of naming, data formats, attribution. So that highlighted the importance of having a common data model. Security concerns is also a key one that came up, and to respond to that, we've really embedded security throughout NUAR at every stage of the process. The next two key challenges are more cultural. That we found sometimes there's a reluctance to share incomplete data and sometimes even embarrassment. And we've worked a lot with asset owners to kind of say, you know, some data is better than nothing, and it's fine if it's incomplete. The next cultural one is the kind of capabilities and approaches to data sharing. Some asset owners, they published their data online, they wanted to set up APIs with us, and others are very unused to sharing data. So we've had to really tailor our approach depending on their cultural preference. Perhaps less relevant for local authorities, but there have been competition concerns too in the utilities sector. So to respond to that, we've had a very tight focus on the use cases and made sure that we're sharing only specific data to share with specific people to meet the specific use cases. We're not asking for any old data to share with anyone. And then the final one is regulation and legal constraints. So we've got a huge legal work stream, and we've also worked with the regulators to address some of the concerns. And then final slide for me is some of the lessons learned. So I think the first two really are that there is just no one size fits all. Particularly with local authorities, we sometimes spoke with the head of data, we spoke with infrastructure teams, highways teams, GIS leads. It was a different role at every local authority. And we understand that local authorities have limited resource, they have competing priorities. So we really had to tailor our approach to be specific for each individual case and just not take a one-size-fits-all approach. Related to that, we also found that local authorities have different data sets, and sometimes it was in a centralized database, sometimes it was across multiple teams and functions. And so to respond to that, we created a very simple shopping list of data so that our key contacts were equipped to go out and speak to different parts of the organization and gather the data. Despite the diversity, we found some common onboarding lessons across all of the different stakeholders. The first one I've already mentioned is that senior sponsorship can significantly reduce the time for onboarding. The next one is that legal review, the benefit of connecting you with existing partners. And this was actually a really nice finding from NUAR, is that, you know, if there was a local authority struggling with a legal process, we could put them in touch with another local authority who had signed, and they were very happy to share the learning. Or one asset owner was vectorizing their data and struggling, and we put them in touch with another one who had recently gone through that process. The next one, legal review, takes time, but many questions can be answered by providing the information up front and setting the proper context. Number 6 is very important, is the need for people, and it really helps to have a dedicated coordinator, because NUAR entails input from the legal, the technical side, the highway side, so having someone who's well connected really speeds things up. And then the final 2 lessons relate more from the technical aspect. So really, we need to be flexible in terms of data refresh rates, and we need to understand that different data sets vary, and we need to accommodate that. And then the final one is to engage with technical contacts early. It's never too early to start having a data workshop and set the scene in terms of the data ask. That's it from me. I'll hand over to Bob now to talk more about the data acquisition journey.
Excellent, thank you. So I'll build on some of the experiences that Guy and Helen have been talking about and give you some practical examples of what's happening so people can start to understand what to expect. And also to build on, I think it came up in both Guy and what Helen was saying, the momentum we've built up right from the early pilots, which is an important thing really to remember. And then the speed with which, Guy, you were saying that the 600 plus ready to engage, the momentum is huge. And the lessons we're learning as we build up that momentum is incredible. So we're making the whole, or what we're trying to achieve is make sure that whole experience for all the asset owners is just getting better and better as we keep up that momentum. So the first thing I wanted to just make sure is that everyone understands when we start that data collection, that data engagement conversations, you know, as early as we can, which is something that Helen was saying, trying to do it earlier and earlier, gives us that opportunity to start to work out how we can kind of reduce any sort of burden or risk or stress or tasks on the actual asset owners. So the way we've adopted it, even though we know and we've discovered and we understood from the pilot stage, there's so much data in different formats and structures, but actually we've got quite a good process. As Helen was saying, we know what data we actually need to deliver what NUAR needs from a use case perspective. So although there's a range of things we have to deal with, we can pretty much take the data in your structure and your format, and we will deal with the rest of it. That's what we've been designing the systems and the process and actually the teams as well to allow us to do all that. We're also, something that Helen just mentioned, to make sure what we're building is completely flexible and not only simple to use and nice and secure, but the flexibility around when you then agree the frequency of how quickly you'll re-upload or refresh the data, again, is entirely down to what we agree with the different asset owners. And we'll get a whole range of frequency rates that the update will happen. Again, it goes back to something that we mentioned already. Having access to some of the data is definitely more beneficial than not having access to the data, especially when you consider the scale of the job that we're doing. Having a few extra marginal gains to help us build out a full picture of this national asset that we were creating in the National Underground Asset Register is huge. And then the third example where, again, Guy talked about some of the key enablers around the agreements about when we will actually take the data and make it available. Sharing and giving us access to some of the data early. Until those agreements are in place, we've got all the right checks and balances, which we will go through before any of the data that we start working with is shared externally. So there's no need to worry about the risk of any of that going out and not following those checks and balances. So the data journey that we're taking people on, it transitions from some of the engagement that particularly Helen was talking about, right through to what we're doing on the technical side to build that repeatable and sustainable automated process that Guy mentioned. So identifying what source data is required for NUAR. So we've got some information around the shopping lists and things, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Making sure we can get access to some of that data from the asset owners that we're engaging with. Giving that ability to upload the data in a nice, secure, safe way, so we can get it into the technical teams, looking at the schema harmonization and the transformation work. And that gives us a really early insight to do the schema harmonization, which is saying, well, we've accessed your data in your structure, in your file formats that comes out of your systems in the easiest way possible for you. And we'll take on the task of mapping that into the model that underpins the NUAR system. So we'll build that also in a nice, repeatable, rules-based way, so that when you re-engage and go through the user experience of using the NUAR service in the future, it will all be set up ready for you. The rules will run, and they'll do all the things that we've tested and built during this first phase. Then once we've built those rules, the transformation, like I said, will just automatically happen. The data will be processed, the system will be updated. But again, the engagement early on is key for us to keep that momentum going, and it won't be until those key enablers, so the data ingestion specification and the data distribution agreements have been signed and agreed with yourselves and with the entire consortium, that will then be going into the sort of the business as usual flow. So, and the reason we're all presenting today is that we were involved, you know, as an entire consortium the last few days, just making sure as we get more people involved and the momentum builds up, that at each one of those touch points, we're constantly having a look to see what improvements can we make to go even faster. So what happens when we first do some of those data collection sessions and run those data workshops? Well, we've got a bit of a data ask for people. We've got some narrative that we go through to explain what we need and what information we think the different types of asset owners might have. We put together a usually like a 1-hour session where we'll then talk in a little bit more detail about what's required. The shopping list idea has been quite popular, that we've been building out and constantly refining. So almost turning up to the conversation and saying, well, these are the types of bits of information you may have that would be really useful to contribute to NUAR. We can then go through each of those and on a one-on-one basis, capture all that information, and then something that I'll mention in a minute. Importantly, write all this down for you and document it and send it back to you, so it's information and almost a little audit routine that you can take back into your own organization and get and use that for your own business. So what actually gets uploaded, like I say, the data will be provided to us from yourselves in your own format and structure. We also ask for a little bit of additional information about the data that's being provided. So there's some sort of mandatory information that we need to know about. So what's the coverage that we're looking at? What are the contact details for this? So there's some key things and key almost compliance metrics that we put in place, as well as the digital data. But all this gets captured and documented, and it will end up in the data information specification, ingestion specification, that will be provided back to you at the end. What we first do, actually, once we receive the data, so you can imagine after we've had the data discovery session and those conversations about what data may be available and then what is provided, we've got some routines that we go through to almost provide a sanity check of what has been sent. So any little assumptions that we may have made in those early conversations, we can get those written down and agreed and clarified. The transformation then happens, and that's where, an simple example we've got here, you may be managing some data called archaeological interest areas. You may have an attribute or a space in your system where you store the notes about that. Whereas we know in the NUAR system, we've got something we call an archaeological site, and that contains a description. So we go through and make sure we understand how we map that data together. And with the range of data we've seen and we are expecting from the different asset owners, there's then a need to go back with a few clarification questions to make sure we get the mapping right and we get it all agreed. And all this is supported from the team's perspective using various automated and machine learning techniques to make sure we can do this as quickly as possible and as efficiently as possible. So what then happens once we've produced that? Well, one of the tasks is the data does end up in a big repository in a database, which is what will then be used to facilitate the delivery of that information back out. So as Guy said, back out to the systems that you then end up using, be that phones, tablets, desktops, all that sort of stuff. But another really key part of the output as well, which, like I say, I think is really useful for the asset owners, we've had some good feedback from the engagement so far, is around this data ingestion specification. So everything that we do and automate, we write down and document. So we explain what we did to the data. We provide feedback on what we found out about the data. And we'll look to make sure that you're in control of that as well. So we're looking to make sure that gets signed off by yourselves, so you understand what it is we've done and what it is that we found out. But building up that data feedback, like I said, it's really producing a really rich data catalog of your holding and information about that, which you can use to take back into your own organization to start building out or contributing to your own data governance processes. And finally, some of the next sort of steps. Well, like I mentioned a few times, Guy was talking about the key enablers to saying all this is going to be safe and secure until we get to that final DDA being signed. That's when we'll be able to make sure that access to the data is provided in the right secure and safe way, and all the right, as I mentioned, checks and balances have taken place before we make that happen. We'll also be providing the ability to asset owners to refresh their data, and as Helen said, on a nice flexible basis, as frequently as they can, they'll be able to access the system to provide new updates, or even start to think about whether they want to provide things like API access to the data that they've got to speed up the frequency. When that happens, there'll also be some nice dashboard features within the systems that will allow you to go back in and track and check to see when uploads were made to NUAR, what happened when the uploads were made, have a look at our feature counts going up. So again, contributing back to that data ingestion specification or back into your own business. So you're tracking what you've got, how you manage it, what the quality levels are of it, but all within your own dashboard view for your own benefit. Then, like I said, that live stream of data directly from the asset owners are also features that we'll be building into the system, which will start to become available as we roll out the entire NUAR service.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Helen. Thank you very much too. Thank you all kind of for listening today. NUAR is a really big, complex and challenging project, and it's hard to kind of compress our story into kind of 30, 35 minutes. So hopefully, however, we've managed to give you some appreciation and a taste of what the project is, and maybe we've even kind of sparked your interest to kind of come and find out more and discover more about the project. NUAR really is an important project. There is a big benefit and opportunity to be kind of gained and to be had. NUAR will be the only one-stop shop for obtaining all underground asset data in one place, sort of within an instant, and that data will be kind of fresh and reliable and the latest possible data. It's going to be the only platform and system that will do that. More than that, NUAR is also, it's a bellwether project to show the benefits and the value that comes from data sharing, and sharing data between organizations, but between private sector and public sector. And if we can kind of demonstrate the value and benefit that comes from that through NUAR, there will be other use cases and other opportunities to kind of get value from that data sharing. The NUAR safety case is just the start of the kind of value journey. Ultimately, the platform and the aggregation of the data, it's going to provide a really powerful resource and foundation for future digital transformation and use cases. And I touched on one of those in my part of the presentation about the coordination of street works, for example, earlier. But there are many more potential use cases, and completing this NUAR project is going to be the key to that future. We're kind of clearly biased, however, about the benefits of NUAR, and I just wanted to sort of end on this last slide, because it's not just us. Okay, there are plenty of people of influence and from other organisations outside of the project who are advocates for what we're doing, and a few of them are on the screen here. So listen, thank you very much again for listening to our talk today. We've got time now for some of your questions, which hopefully we'll be able to answer. If you are unable to ask a question today, or something springs to mind after you've heard this presentation, then please do reach out. You can reach out to any one of us directly, or you can use the contact details that are on the screen here, and we'll all be really happy to help you. So again, thank you for listening, and back to you, Robin.
Great, thanks, Guy. So we have got a little bit of time, but they're going to be short, sharp answers, I think. So I'll start with Bob. What is the time investment to complete the data transformation? Obviously, this is going to take time.
Yeah, so there's some tasks for us to do where we kind of take the pain away for a few weeks while we work out all the transformations, but there is a bit of work up front. Usually the data workshops are around an hour session that we might have, where we start probing a little bit about, from the shopping list of data that might be available, just working out, is it available? As Helen said, lots of people are at different maturity levels across which is expected across this vast range of asset owners that we're dealing with. But after that workshop, then there could be a few clarification questions that we need to go backwards and forwards with. But the process we built up to document all this and share it means that it is quite an efficient process from that engagement piece. Getting to that engagement piece is another matter. And then, like I say, there's a bit of work on our side to build the transformations, but we do know, and we have experience from some of the asset owners, there's a bit of time on their side then to kind of go away and gather the data that is available. And I know that's varied across some of the asset owners.
Yep.
Yeah.
Question to sorry, Helen. We're gonna rock through these questions. There are quite a lot coming in. So, but there's some important ones here. So, Guy, will it be mandatory to provide data to NUAR?
So at the moment, it's not mandatory. The Geospatial Commission and Cabinet Office is going out to consultation later in the year to consider the need to try and take a mandatory approach. But at the moment, we're really hopeful that the sort of the benefit case and the value case is really clear and demonstrable to all the people that need to take part, and therefore, everyone will be willing to kind of participate and join in.
And I guess a follow-up to that is, are people liable if they provide poor quality data, or if NUAR has mistakes on it? Are there some liability issues?
Well, Rob, there's a really important question. It comes up quite often. So what NUAR doesn't do, it doesn't change any of the kind of the liabilities for anybody. Okay, so because all we're doing is we are representing the data that is already exists and already comes from those asset owners. So we're not seeking to change that data. We're not going to be improving the quality of that data or adjusting in any way. So the existing kind of place for liabilities will be where they are now. They won't change going forwards.
Okay. Question for Helen. When will NUAR be approved for planning teams to access?
So I think Guy already mentioned that, as we're gathering all of this underground asset data, the potential new use cases, there's a long list of them. So for planning, for infrastructure coordination, for resilience and so on. For the time being, we're keeping a close focus on the current use cases for security concerns and buy-in. But we do have these additional use cases which are included in the legal framework to potentially add on in time. And the Geospatial Commission will be seeking views for this in the consultation which Guy mentioned that's going out in spring of this year.
Okay, brilliant. Who's going to have access to the information in NUAR?
I'll take that, shall I? So the current plan is that NUAR will be available to the asset owners. So asset owners will be able to log in and create an account and then use the platform, but also that they will then be able to make it available to their supply chain. So if you've got organisations or contractors that work for your organisation that need to kind of the same information, that they will then be able to access NUAR to get that data. So that's the current plan. Brilliant.
Question here about sort of keeping it up to date. How will you ensure that so people sort of download their data to you once, if this is what we've got, how will you then ensure that kind of it keeps up to date?
Do you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. So one of the features we're building into the system, and to keep it nice and flexible, there's two routes. Some asset owners have already been talking about providing access to interfaces that they already have, so programmatically for allow us to access the data when we need it. So that gives us a total control over the flexibility and how frequent it happens. But then we've also, to make sure we cover everybody, the asset owners themselves will be able to log in when they want to provide that new refresh. And importantly, we're going to be capturing what those predicted and sort of initial estimated refresh rates will be for all asset owners for the whole thing. So we'll be able to make sure we can be flexible, but also manage it. So we'll understand what's happening and when.
Question here: are you talking to any works management systems that may ingest this data for end users?
Not at the moment. No, we're focused on the primary use case, which is around the safety case, so making the data available to people that log into the system. But what you just touched on there is, the opportunity potentially for kind of future benefit and future use cases.
Brilliant. Question here, the scope of this work seems to be wider than just underground assets. Includes brownfield sites, for example. Where can we find the latest spec and all the data being captured and published for NUAR?
I can take that question.
Yeah, maybe. So I think, generally it is underground assets, but we are capturing some data with overground components. The overall data ask is broadly any data that would be useful for an excavator when they're out on site doing a dig. So that things like tree preservation orders or lamp posts, or even where you tie your bike up on a bike rack, that kind of data. They're obviously overground, but it's very valuable for an excavator to have sight of that before they go on site.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think that's probably it for questions. Thank you so much for rattling through so many. Thank you to everyone who has uploaded a question during the presentation. Our presenters have all said they're very happy to be followed up with and ask specific questions. I hope everyone on this call agrees that NUAR is a great thing and that we should all support it and make it happen and overcome any blockages or difficulties. You've got sort of 60 seconds for any final thoughts from our three presenters.
Well, so you just said, hopefully, people can get behind the project. It's really important. We're all really passionate about it. We've all been involved in the sort of the run-up to this project for a number of years. It is important. It is exciting. So hopefully we'll get to speak to some of the people on the call in the near future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks everyone. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.